Cool. Plan team meeting, 17th of August, 2022. Right, I have the first item. So yeah, like this came up during the week, and I wasn't sure how far we got with it or whether we stalled with it or what. But we used to have the notion of creating a unified notification center. And I know Alexandria was working on parsing mentions out of comments and issue descriptions and all that kind of thing. So my questions were like, do we still have all these tables? Are we keeping them up to date? What would it be like? What would it take to finish this feature? And would it help with some of the slowness we're seeing related to calculating participants, which is in some cases like extremely slow? Gabe, you have the first comment.
Yeah, so I actually surfaced this on my team's 15.4 planning issue, something that I would love to classify in the maintenance bucket, right, for things and then slowly chip away at. A community member had pinged me a couple weeks ago with an interesting idea that if we had taken a more passive approach to doing this sort of, that it would be almost done now. I don't know if it was a viable path, just because like I don't know if we could selectively know which issues have been migrated to using the appropriate tables or not. In any event, I think this would be great because I think there's a lot of performance wins anyways, because it seems like, having to parse through like thousands of lines of markdown to get out all the references millions of times a week would help. So if we want to share this with product planning, I don't know where things are at. I know Alexandru did at least one migration. I don't know if we're still storing everything the right way, so we might have to revisit that, but that would be great. He at least outlined the whole plan, so I think if his implementation path still stands, then it should be easy to pick back up. And I also wanted to call out that the building the proper notification center and like is a huge undertaking. Right. And I think this would, at least if we did this, it would at least allow us to surface all the issues that you're subscribed to, which is probably one of the most upvoted issues in all of our stage. So there's that.
Yeah, I recently actually chatted Alexandra about this in Slack in our clan channel, like because I was curious about what the state of things are. So actually the tables are there and we are saving the data every time, descriptions are updated, notes are updated, and all that are created and updated. So new notes and new descriptions are, have what we think is the correct data, but we still have, if there are edge cases or anything. And the thing is, we don't use this data right now, right? So we don't know if it's 100% correct, until it's out there. So the next step actually is to use this data in computing the participants. So participants does not entirely contain, it's not 100% mentions, right? Because it contains the issue author, the note authors, and all that. So the participants logic has to account for those. And yeah, instead of parsing markdown, it just uses the mentions table. So I think that's the next step. And I was also just going to note, I kind of found it confusing that we're saying notification center here and the subscription thing. So I guess you could say it's part of the notification center if one part of the notification center has the list of issues you're subscribed to or something like that, right? But I guess the notification center idea is also like much bigger, like including the to-dos and all that. But yeah.
I think they're related, but yeah.
Just to clarify there, you said new notes and new descriptions have what we think is the correct data. Do we need to do some kind of backfill migration to migrate all previous issues and descriptions?
Yeah, for previous issues, I remember we did some sort of backfill, but the last thing I remember was it's not like complete, so we might need to redo or something. So that's something that needs to be confirmed or something. So we're actually doing what the community contributor like kind of mentioned. It's like the new things right now are actually being filled up in the tables. So the the main thing we need to do is to verify right now and to find out which ones need migrating, if there's a way to do that. So we only migrate the rows that need to, and yeah.
Cool. So for some context, some epic sidebars don't load at all at the minute if there are too many comments on the epic. And it's really a horrible experience because the queries are combined anyway. The request times out before you get labels or any other information about the epic. And I feel like if we could just use a table to look up participants. I mean, I wonder in the first place how useful participants actually is. I certainly don't think we should be blocking the rest of the sidebar on the basis of it not being available quickly. But even better if we could maintain the same experience or even improve it, but also improve performance as well.
And also, I'd like to add that the code review team also has problems with this recently because of some system note like that had like thousands of commit references. And then when you parse markdown, we also parse these commits for some, because we're checking access and all that. But they worked on some optimizations, though I think it's still like kind of a hack, right? Or a workaround. They kind of skip these system notes that don't have user references. So it's kind of a trick. It worked, but yeah, should be good to get this going anyway.
Gabe, I think you're the only PM on the call. So like if I'm looking for a solution to this problem I have where participants are far too slow in some epics, I'm trying to gauge like what's the appetite to fix this. I'd like to complete this work to a certain extent that we could consume this table to calculate participants. Like, are we talking like a 3-month thing, or is it like on the long finger for a year, or what's your read?
It's one of those things where customers don't ask for this necessarily, but if we can use this work to solve the problem of eventually somewhere in the UI showing a list of all the issues that I'm subscribed to, it's a huge win for the wider community. And I think for everyone who likes to use GitLab, and it's a quality of life thing. So that's where I was sort of saying if we can couch some of the work in maintenance, at least all of the backfills and getting the data model right, then it makes the effort to actually build it to the UI much smaller. That makes sense. So it's sort of one of those things that like I wouldn't dedicate all of the team to, but just like to chip away at slowly over time, if we can all do that as a team. I don't know if that answers your questions, but I think it would be nice to deliver on at some point.
Cool, thanks. Alexis, come on in.
I can't type very fast, apparently. Yeah, and we could also do some research into, if users use this, why, what they expect to see here. And I don't think that negates what Gabe just said, but like to your point, do users even want this and why? John, and I know the create team was playing around with removing participants entirely, so I could loop in with them and understand why as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's really frustrating that this is the thing that slows down these epics entirely, because I'm not sure. I mean, I never use it. I assume somebody has a use case for participants, but I never use it, and I don't know why somebody would.
Just to add, though, even if like end users don't use it, like our code also uses it to send notifications, right? So it also speeds up that part. So
was there some UI work done around the notification center at one point? I seemed like I remember seeing something about that.
Matthew Neritz from Create was working on doing some solution validation around the notification center. I don't know how far he got. I think it sort of stalled out because we didn't have engineering capacity to kind of move it forward. But the idea is sort of evolving to-dos to be instead of like having all of your notifications only delivered to email, they can all be in GitLab, and then sort of changing how to-dos behave to make more sense. And then as part of that, you could basically see all the lists, or a list of all the issues that you're participating in or subscribe to or whatever, right? Because we're using it for the participants for notifications. And so like trying to bring that all together into a cohesive experience similar to what GitHub has for their nice little review page for a single person. But I'm not sure where that's at. And I personally would love to work on it, but it's like, and again, it's one of those quality of life things that would be great to prioritize, but it's also not something that our customers are banging on the door for. So it's hard to figure out how to get it prioritized.
Blair has something related here, I think. Blair, do you want to voice that?
Yeah, I don't want to jump in front of Kishal, but Jackie Bauer started sort of renewing interest in that notification center by getting some volunteers to. It's a perpetual topic where, man, I really wish we could do a notification center or make to-dos better or whatever. Clump that all in, and she's sort of polling people who are interested in volunteering their time on the UX side to explore some ideas. So that'll link to the issue right there.
Thanks. Kushal, you want to talk about Octobox?
Yeah, so I discovered Octobox, I think almost 5 years ago. It has been a quite old project, and it always supported GitHub. It never supported anything else, but it basically uses GitHub public APIs by authenticating user via SSO, and you can basically log in with your GitHub account, and then it pulls in all the notifications and organizes it well. It doesn't fetch the data and show it within its own app, but it basically creates a set of links in an accessible way where you can basically look at different categories like which projects you have and what kind of notification from a particular project you have received. So I think we can at least look at how Octobox is doing and maybe get some ideas from there.
I think I was next. One of the things too, just future thinking, I'd love to see participants evolve into something more like sharing. Like we talked about that. I know Heinrich chatted with me a bit on the issue about adding a non-project member to a confidential issue, which is a big blocker for a couple companies adopting GitLab. And then there's also the idea of like sharing issues with other groups and projects, that sort of thing. But anyway, like that would seem like if it became this like mechanism to show who had access or who the issue or work item was shared with, it might have a little bit more value other than just like seeing it, right? Because I don't think it adds a ton of value on its own from like an end user standpoint, but I think it could evolve into being something that adds value. So definitely worth doing some more research on, I think.
Cool. I think next step there is probably for us to decouple those. Like the immediate problem that we have on the product planning side is with this Epic thing. So I think the first thing we'll do is decouple those queries, and then maybe we should just, like Henrik, you mentioned that there was a partial migration done. Maybe we should look into that and maybe do some tests to see like if the data that we have already is reliable, because if it is already done and it's still being updated, then maybe we can kind of use this to build participants instead. And that's a much nicer solution. As far as the notification center itself, like we can revisit that in future, I suppose. Cool. All right, I have the next item. Just a quick one. We need to update documentation related to tasks today, as it still describes the old experience and not the experience that we'll release. Marcin has been working on this, but needs help from an engineer to help him close out the threads that are currently open on that MR, mostly related to permissions. Could anyone from engineering who's currently on the call volunteer to help close those threads? If not, I can look for somebody outside. Going once. All right, cool. I'll look outside the call. Martin, you're up next.
Hi. So I've discussed some time ago with Gabe, and Nick has raised it a couple of times. We at some point we want to start introducing to users the term work item, I guess. Since like it shows up in a couple of places, and I thought a separate doc page would be good for that, and then in the docs nav we could nest tasks under it. And I don't know, like we could explain the things we're planning for work items to have in common. This is more of an FYI and an invitation to help me draft what we want to have in these in this like introductory iteration. Thanks. Gabe, I see your read only, and so Kushal.
Yeah, so I was just adding that a couple of months ago we had this discussion on our Slack. Like most of our features are increasingly focusing on enterprise users, while we don't think of features from ground up for our ICs, or essentially community users who are not necessarily paying customers of GitLab, but at the same time are looking forward to such features. And there were like direct comparisons with competition where there are features exclusively useful for ICs and individual contributors. So I think Notification Center is kind of a project that can be sold to our higher ups as something that we can work on as a team, and then it basically is kind of overlapping between something for ICs and something for the enterprise users as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I agree. I talk with Melissa's here now, and I talk to her all the time about like how do we make progress on to-dos and notifications. I feel stuck. Like where should it live? Is planning the right place? And long term, I don't know if plan is the right place because it doesn't have a lot to do with planning. But I think if this is something we all like agree that we want to come together around and contribute to, I think it might be more realistic to make progress while also maintaining velocity with our direction items. Like if we want this to be a stage-wide sort of like initiative that we contribute to, and it's not like deliverable necessarily, but something that we want to make consistent progress on month over month. I know there's a ton of appetite across the company too that we could drum up support and help with. And so if that's something that like y'all really are passionate about doing, then I will put on my PM hat for that and try to help get things coordinated and kind of treat it more like a true open source thing where like everybody can just sort of work on it as they can. But yeah, that'd be cool if y'all want to do that.
Gabe, there's a couple of options of things that we could do if we have like a clean backlog. One is we could do something like we're doing with health status and product planning, where there's items that are sort of like ready to be picked up, but they're not going to be deliverables. They're sort of just in the queue, right? Like in case it's almost the end of the milestone and someone needs something to pick up, they're sort of there and ready. So that's one. The second is if we can get a clean backlog, we could likely kind of structure a hackathon around this, right? If there are a lot of smaller things, I don't know what the backlog for this looks like, but that's another option that we could try.
Yeah, second benefit
Yeah.
of that is that we actively encourage contributors to look under a particular label, and for issues with weight one and that kind of thing, like assuming that the majority of contributors are first-time contributors or relatively new, the benefit of having like the whole thing, like a really small iteration fully scoped out and weighted and with this correct label, is that like some people from the community can just pick up issues and they can see what they're going to contribute to it and everything. So even before we like approach the idea of a hackathon, just having the issues there, that they show up in the lists that we encourage people to look at when they want to make a contribution, would even be a win.
I feel like they're having the high level design of what this is really supposed to look like and stuff would be key to making that happen, that we can then scope down into smaller, NPCs and do that. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, my next point was just like I can get things organized, but I also know that we haven't finalized UX research and solution design validation here. And that's the question is like, how do we want to proceed? Like, I'm inclined to say, go for it. We'll figure it out along the way. We can kind of do something and learn as we go. But Blair might think otherwise because there's a sort of we just want to make sure we don't introduce anything that's weird. But I trust everyone. Like, we're all working together. We'll figure it out. But is there anything that Blair or Nick or Alexis y'all want to do to, or at least like help us figure out what we need to do? We can also coordinate with Jackie since she's got this team assembled on this as well. I don't know. What do y'all think?
So that's where I've gotten myself to. I'm now the police on validation. Okay. I think honestly coordinating with that effort is probably our best bet. Listen, the notification center had the biggest push forward with Nearance before I was even here. And so I think it's a lot of good can come from a passion project with a bunch of people who care about the topic, taking it forward. If that solves our problem, though, they may be wanting to go do this for a different reason, not sort of the multifold issues that we're seeing here. Basically, all of this is converging on notification center and whatnot here. So, yeah, that's not really a thought.
I think if we really tried, we could find a lot of this like user proof of this being a problem, Gabe. Like I can help you with that. I think there's a lot of stuff on like sus. There's a lot of feedback on NPS. Like this is a theme. I think it should be pretty easy to find some like high level stuff.
Yeah, the problem is not like there's so much data about that exists in all the issues and things like that. It's just the solution, I guess, is what I'm saying is like
okay,
how we take all that. And Matthew started on a design, but part of what he's proposing is radically changing how to-dos work and removing all the automation generation of it and a bunch of other stuff. And then we have some engineering constraints, like how do we actually store all the notifications? Like, can we store all the notifications that ever get delivered in email in GitLab? So there's a couple things there.
Yeah.
I mean, what I would say is if it's that much of a wanted feature, if we can really produce that story, we can definitely dedicate time to running it quickly through validation. I think someone's already posted, Donald already posted some beginning solution validation or research validation on that. So it's whether we want to go in that direction or not. Is there value? It seems like there is. It seems like it's pretty easy to make that case. And if so, we can reserve the time to do the proper validation, light validation, considering all the work that's already been done on it, and make it a real thing.
Yeah, I just put like maybe loop in a researcher to kind of help build out that backlog of the inputs if we don't have it yet. Like help you synthesize through that problem validation.
Okay, cool. As the next time, I'll connect with Jackie and let her know we're interested in taking more like organic approach towards pushing this forward. Just and then see what we can do there. I think she already has meetings scheduled on every few weeks or something like that. If you're interested and this has inspired you, I definitely encourage you to go to that issue that she created and kind of just make it known. Because I'm going to volunteer there as well. I think the first session is planned for August 26th. So even if you can't come to the sync stuff, everything will be recorded and it'll be mostly async, I'm assuming. So I'll do that as the next step.
Awesome.
And thank you, Kushal, for pushing on that.
Cool. So I have the next item and all the previous items. And yeah, if I don't get some like kind of I don't know. If somebody doesn't ask me what I'm talking about with this, like I'll be really upset. So according to the cross-functional working group, it's counterintuitive, but when you're adding type labels, first of all, this is really important now to avoid things like engineering allocations, and also so that we're reporting correctly what proportion of work we're working on, bugs, tech debt, and new features. And the thing about bug is that like it's supposed to be a defect in shipped code, and our definition of shipped code is that the feature flag is defaulted to on. So in things like tasks, when we're fixing a bug with tasks, but we haven't switched on tasks, say the hierarchy widget yet, it's not actually a bug until it's in the shipped code. And therefore everything that contributes to a feature, whether it's a tech debt fix, a bug fix, whatever, until it's released to customers, it's a feature, either a feature addition or a feature enhancement. Once it's shipped to customers, once we ship a bug to customers, though, it's a bug, right? It's a defect in the system. And yeah. Yes, Brett. Bugs are now featured. That's basically the story. Like, but there is logic to it. It's just counterintuitive when you go to imply this or apply this label to your MRs and issues. I would just ask that you check like it. There are some like edge cases where the feature itself hasn't been released, but the code that you're working on hasn't been released. You just watch out for it anyway. And if you have any questions, raise a question with one of the DRIs for the issue. But again, like we don't want to spend too much time worrying over type labels. It should be fairly intuitive in like 90% of cases. But in this case, like I noticed it multiple times this month, and that just goes to show like how counterintuitive it actually is. Yeah, so come on, somebody's got to disagree.
Bug performance also kind of like confuses me because for the same reasons, like for similar reasons, like if it's a performance issue that that doesn't break users' behavior or workflow right now, should that be a bug performance, or should be the feature enhancement, right? Or
yeah, so there was an MR last week to introduce feature performance. But I think that's been removed. So yeah, like look, it's weird as well, but it's just kind of I think the closest type that it fits under currently is bug, and that could change, I guess. But yeah, I also find it weird.
If you want someone to disagree with you, my main argument would be we want to treat GitLab as .com first. So when it's enabled, but not by default, it's not a bug if something happens. So that would be my disagreement.
Yeah, I agree. But like, yeah, but that's also true of the feature itself, right? When we're writing documentation, we don't write enabled on gitlab.com in 15.3, enabled for self-hosting in 15.4. We say like the feature was brought in behind a feature flag, and then the feature flag was enabled by default, right? Or
okay, so I disagree here, as you wanted. It's exactly the opposite of what you said. We do say we do note when it was enabled on self-managed and on GitLab.com.
Yeah, interesting. I couldn't find the line. Maybe somebody from product can help me, but I couldn't find the line in the handbook that explicitly says a feature isn't shipped or released or whatever generally available until the feature flag is defaulted to on. But I know it to be true, and I know we don't write the release post until it's at least defaulted to on. So there must be some guidance in the handbook somewhere there that we can point to for this.
And it's also with, like, I always struggle with when we should close a feature issue. Like, should it be closed when we default the feature flag on? And then I think it would make sense that anything, like once the actual feature issue is closed, any defects that are found at that point are actually bugs. because that's considered delivered. But then I feel like we should be closing those feature issues once we actually deliver it, regardless of feature flags, because we have a different issue for feature flag management. So I don't know if we have a definition of what shipped means in the handbook.
I think this shipping thing also affects like feature addition and feature enhancement, right? Because if we introduce a new feature with like multiple MRs, we're supposed to label it as feature addition, right? Because it's for the same feature. But then if it's a shipped feature, then we say enhancement, and then that's very blurry line too.
I think the subtypes, I don't really get the value of them. Like enhancement versus addition versus consolidate. Like it's all just like I don't know. I've never ever looked at that data. Has anyone looked at like the actual breakdown beyond the top 3 types?
Yeah, we're supposed to, like, as EMs and PMs, I think now, do it once a month and look and make sure that like our teams are delivering broadly along the ratios that but it's in counts of MRs, right? It's not, which itself is problematic because, you know, some are bigger than others.
It's for the types though. I don't think there's been guidance about the subtype use yet. It's just like the feature maintenance bug, which I actually have found that very useful to look at that breakdown. I was very skeptical, but it's been useful.
Yeah, I did that. It was just about the subtypes. Like I didn't know what value the subtypes were adding. That's all.
But we're not required to add the subtypes yet, right? So, or are we? We're supposed to add both?
The
Maybe
box is
probably.
already complaining if you don't have a subtype. I don't know if we are required, but we're definitely encouraged.
Yeah, and to answer Gabe's question, I don't think we have enough data yet to see if there's value in subtypes. I tend to agree that there's not as much value as there is in classifying types. But again, I just don't think we have enough data yet to be able to tell if there's any value there. Be nice to automate a lot of that stuff, especially at the subtype level. But down the road.
Is Heinrich's comment about bug performance like generally shared by everybody else about subtypes then? Because that's kind of how I feel about them as well. They're almost too specific to be useful. And in most cases, like, they don't really describe what the thing does. Like bug UX, I would imagine, is every bug, right? Because it's being experienced. If it's not being experienced, it's not a bug. I don't know, but is that generally how people feel about it? Like the subtypes are too specific?
It's too nuanced, I guess. Right? Like the addition versus enhancement, right? Like what is the very clear delineation between the two? Right? Like because if we're iterating on a feature, like let's say iterations, everything's an enhancement, even though we might be like adding a new field or doing something like that. I just never know exactly when to use which. That's all.
Yeah, it's like, was health status an addition of a new feature or an enhancement of an issue? Everything's an enhancement or everything's an addition.
I think based on what I read, I think you only use the addition label if you're adding something to feature.yaml in the release post. And then if it basically it's not a new feature in feature.yaml, then it's an enhancement. But I could be wrong.
Ben, you want to make your comment there?
Yes, I was looking for an issue I raised that I'm not persuaded users have any experience of, but it looks like a bug. So, and anything that a customer sees that's wrong is a bug, right? So we might not have turned a feature on yet, but if, for example, some corner case means that feature is causing 500 errors on GitLab.com, that's a bug. because it's broken another feature. But I mean, I suppose a database migration that's on self-managed that's causing issues, we've kind of shipped that, even though maybe the feature we've shipped it for isn't live yet. My main reason for asking it is, I raise bug issues all the time, so but I don't generally do that unless customers have spotted it. The exception would be where I'm looking in logs and I see some behavior that's clearly wrong.
Yeah, I agree that would be a bug. If it's causing 500s on .com in any capacity, like I would say that it's a bug because it affects something on the system that customers use, or it'll affect the availability of the system at least. What I think was interesting is, like you said at the beginning, like any misbehavior that a customer can see is a bug. And the question is, like, what does it mean that a customer can see it, right? Like, because we want to release stuff that's incomplete behind a feature flag so that we can test it as early as possible in a production system. But we know when we release it, it's not complete. So if we would treat being behind a feature flag with being arbitrarily on any given instance, so in other words, the instance admin could switch it on or not, as being delivered to customers, then literally everything we would do after the feature flag is implemented would be a bug fix. But it's not, it's in service of the feature itself. But I do think there's an argument that, like, if people are experiencing it on GitLab.com at all, so like outside of internal groups where the feature is being tested, then it's arguable that it's a bug. Maybe the definition should be like, if it's switched on for all of .com, it's a bug, because like there will also be groups where the customer has asked us to switch on an experimental feature knowing there will be bugs in it, like it will be incomplete, and we can't honestly call that a bug, right? Because it's not a shipped system, it's not part of the system yet.
Well, I mean, aren't we, even with our iteration, we're not supposed to be shipping bugs. I mean, if it's a missing capability of a feature that we're building, that's not a bug. But if something is missing that should be there by all reasonable expectations by the customer, in terms of, well, my name's not showing up, but it should be showing up. Well, that's probably a bug. That shouldn't be part of our iteration cadence, is what I'm saying. And I think Sid talked about that. He said, we're not supposed to be shipping bugs, we'll be shipping small features, but it should be bug-free. So anything that gets out like that, I think, is legitimately should be typed as a bug.
So if I were to rephrase it in terms of, if it's not working as we expect it to work, it's a bug.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between, it's not working because we haven't completed all of our, it's really not feature complete. But if what we shipped is not working correctly, I think that's a bug. And I probably shouldn't have gone out the door if we could have discovered it and fixed it.
Yeah, but I think the question here is not what is a bug or not, but like when, like if we do have some bug like that, like a missing name, for example, we know that's a bug, right? But the question is, like, if it's still feature flag, is it like shipped, or is it like, so
if it's to all of GitLab.com, then yeah, it's kind of shipped, isn't it? I mean, you're directly impacting customers and expecting them to use that feature. If it's kind of just within org, then well, okay, we're the guinea pigs. But if you're shipping it to a customer and expecting them to actually use it and provide feedback, I kind of feel like those are bugs. It's one thing to say this is not, hey, I really wish you could do this, or I wish you could do that, or man, why isn't that there yet? But if it's not working correctly when we enable it for them, I don't know. I kind of put that in the bug category.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we shifting, because I think with the way we and what we talked about earlier, like our mentality has been shipped means feature flag defaulted to on, but that doesn't really account for turning it on for all of SaaS, for all .com. So if we shift our definition of shipped to whenever it's turned on for all of .com, and then anything after that point that comes in that we did not, that is a bug, which I think we know what the definition of a bug is, then at that point it's a bug.
I think it needs to be this definition, yeah, that if it's turned on for globally for GitLab.com, it is a shipped feature. Because we had this discussion yesterday with Kushal's merge request. We could have just disabled the feature and merged the merge request and then enable the feature flag again one day afterwards. But it would have been a bad experience for a user because they had work items, then they didn't have work items for 24 hours, and then they had it again. So if we don't count this as shipped, we could do this as well, which we shouldn't do.
Sorry, Nicholas, I was typing, so if you wouldn't mind adding that to the agenda yourself, I missed it. But I was going to suggest that, so I saw at least 3 of these MRs that I thought were debatable, whether they were bugs or features on this basis during tasks. So would it be useful if I added them to like an issue, and then we could vote on whether we think they're like bugs at the time or features at the time? Like, should take like 2 minutes to do this, and then we have concrete examples of when this would be the case. And because I'm kind of personally split on the argument now, like you made good points, Brett, to be honest, and Donald, like, and I'm not sure, yeah. Definitely if the feature flag is on for .com, although it doesn't meet our wider definition of shipped, like it definitely feels like a bug to me, like if everybody is experiencing it on GitLab.com. On the other hand, I think there's like a gray area around feature flags, and there really shouldn't be. Like, it would be much easier to apply these labels if there was no gray area, you know.
And we have some normal abhorrence to labeling something as a bug. Is that the game? We don't want the metrics behind it, or
just to be as accurate as possible, you know, or like to have a common definition, because the currently, well, like I've been trying to establish this in the working group so that we have a common definition more than I care about like that these are labeled as features rather than bugs. I care that everyone's following the same thing so that it's like, first of all, clear and really quick to be added by engineers, like zero friction. And then second of all, that all teams are being like measured equally. Like we're not counting more bugs and being asked to do more features because we're counting them differently from other teams and so on, that rather we have like a common standard. So yeah, so that's why I'm keen to like figure out which one it is and then figure out how we can like make it really clear to other teams in the handbook or something, or along with the guidance, what label should be applied, which label should be applied. I'm going to do this if nobody objects to it because we're at a stalemate. So if you don't want it, let me know. Ben, you want to take us home?
Do I want to do what?
Take us home. It's a new
take us
phrase I've
home.
learned. Yeah, it
Okay,
means like
right.
make the final comment of the agenda. Yeah, I didn't know.
Okay. Yeah, my question was about whether or not, if an issue was raised as a feature issue rather than a bug issue, might it get under the radar and you end up shipping the bug anyway? That's more a question for team prioritization, I guess, and how you manage new issues being opened. it makes no difference whether or not, if your triage process is identical for bugs and features, it doesn't make any difference.
I would have the same concern in the opposite direction, that like the bug would be like P4, S4, and would other things would like take priority and it would never be fixed. Like an example from yesterday would be in the planning hierarchy widget, it was labeled like the title is child items and we wanted to change it to tasks. Like if that was a bug, it would probably be like a P4, S4 bug, and we just have too many like P2, S2 bugs for that to ever be prioritized soon. But as a feature addition, like as a part of the planning hierarchy feature, it just gets slotted in and done as part of that epic. So I think that could go both ways, but I don't know. Also, it would be like a wait one feature issue, whereas we don't wait bugs. So that might make it more likely to be scheduled. I don't know. This is an unsatisfying end to this agenda item. I apologize, but I have a takeaway.
Way to take us home.
Yeah, nice one, Ben. Okay, so I'll create that issue, like, and I'll ask, and anyone who wants to, I'll put it in the channel. And if you want to come in and vote on whether you think something's a bug or a feature or why, you can do that. I'll also share it with the cross-functional group so they can have an idea of what it looks like to actually use these labels to try and segregate work this way. Yeah, cool. Nobody has a demo or anything they want to demo? No? Any good news from the PMs? No, nothing you want to end the call with?
I don't know if y'all saw, but tasks is going to be the primary top item on the release post. I'm excited.
So anything task related that we wanted to get in is a bug now because it's on for all of .com and it's defaulted on. So it's a super bug now. It's a double bug. But only the stuff we built.
Can you imagine life after task launch? I can.
No.
I'm very excited for it.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Now we should have the hack milestone to work on notifications. Take a break from tasks. Just kidding.
You want notifications on your tasks? The next thing.
I think that's already a bug that's out there.
Awesome. Okay, we're at time anyway. Let's leave it there. Thanks everyone for the deep discussion. Appreciate it. Ciao.